Hi, my name's Leon Rowe. I'm a Forex trader and trading coach at trading180.com, and welcome to this week's Supply and Demand Forex Technical Analysis. If you are a new watcher, welcome, and if you are a returning watcher, welcome back. Let's get straight into the technical analysis, and we're going to start off as we normally do every week on the Dow Jones Dollar Index, right? And the Dow Jones Dollar Index is a measure of basically US dollar strength against the major currencies like the pound, the yen, and the euro, right? So if you're buying the pound, if you're looking to buy the the dollar, right, against any other currency pair, this is what you want to kind of use as almost like an anchor or guide, you know, some confluence to kind of gauge dollar strength and dollar weakness, right? So what we want to do is go through our supply and demand technical analysis basics. So what we need to do is determine value, right? And we do that technically from supply and demand zones, right? So we know that this was previously a cheap area. Why was this a cheap area? Because, you know, buyers basically, you know, bought from here. It's proven that prices, you know, basically went up from here. There was some demand, some buying here. So what we do is we look for prices to come back into, you know, demand zones. The same thing would be from a supply zone perspective. If this was considered expensive, then you can. It's pretty much evident on a price chart that this is quite expensive for the Dow Jones Dollar Index, right? Hence there was more supply than demand, right? So we look for demand zones to determine potential value, right? But value is derived by fundamental principles, and I have a fundamental course which is absolutely free. The link is in the description box below. But just from a technical point of view, prices have come down here into this demand zone, right? So if you want to be a buyer, right, of the dollar, then prices have come down in, and then we would look for buying opportunities on any of the dollar crosses like the dollar yen, the dollar Swiss, etc., right? So that's the first thing we need to determine is potential value. And then the second thing we want to do is look for to determine supply and demand order equation, and basically just where the most supply and demand orders are likely to enter the market, right? So basically people's motives, traders' motives for buying and selling, right? Or buy and sell orders. So entering new positions and even exiting positions depending on whether they've bought or sold. So from a dollar perspective, we would look for horizontal support and resistance, both on the daily and intraday. And we can see from here that we had pretty much like an intraday support zone. And this is just basically used as confluence as well. You don't necessarily have to have all of these in here, but the more the merrier. A, B, and C from horizontal, dynamic, and diagonal support and resistance. But you can see round here is where, you know, traders, it's pretty much an obvious level where you had resistance, bit of support around here, and then prices came back down into this demand zone here, which had some horizontal support and resistance. And then what we want to look for is if there's any diagonal support and resistance, as traders tend to trend trade and trade off of diagonal support and resistance. And let's see if we had any confirming what we did from last week, previous couple weeks. Right here into this area, right, and then you can see where prices have bounced off. This wasn't in a demand zone, so we don't really look for you know, trades that are not in demand zones or supply zones, so there really wasn't anything lining up there. And then we look for dynamic support and resistance, which are basically moving averages, 2150, 100, and 200 EMAs and SMAs, as traders do take these into consideration when looking to buy or sell. And we don't use moving averages to determine which way to buy or sell. We just use it as technical support or potential resistance. Now we've got the 100 and 200 EMAs way below price, so we'd probably be looking for something like the 21 and the 50, and we can see that we had the 50 EMA and SMA both within this area right here, and you can see that it pretty much bounced off of, you know, those that confluence area right there. So we had, you know, horizontal support and resistance within that area. We had obviously within that demand zone, and we had dynamic support from the 50 coming into that area at the moment, right? So seeing this, prices came down here, obviously this week you would be looking for buy trades if you're looking to buy, and we do the same thing if we're looking to sell. So from a sell side perspective, what we want to do is look for new supply zones. That would be the new supply zone there, right? And as we made lower highs and lower lows, and then we would go through this exact same process if we want to be a seller this week, right? Then you'd be looking for horizontal support and resistance both in the daily, and you would zoom down on the intraday, for example, on the 4 hour, just to see if we could see some get better, basically like detail, right, on certain support and resistance zones. Then we would look for obviously any diagonal support and resistance, and it looks like you've got something here, right, from that perspective. And then obviously any dynamic, but we know that we don't have any dynamic 2150, 100 or 200 EMAs or SMAs. And then what you would do is wait for prices to come up into anywhere around this area here before looking for a sell, right? And it's because when you think about who is taking profit, who is, if you bought here, right, demand, your buy order, and then you're selling here to exit, take profit, it's a sell order, right? New traders are going to be who are looking at support and resistance levels. You know, if they're trading the Dow Jones Dollar Index, then they'll be looking to establish new positions. And if they're looking to get short around this area, then what they're doing, they're going to be pressing sell, right? And you have to ask yourself who is actually buying from a technical perspective, right? Who's going to be buying around here? Yeah, from a technical perspective up into certain highs, or who's going to be selling down here into certain lows, or who's likely, right? It's probabilities that we're looking at. And we use the same approach, and this is just the basics of technical analysis, supply and demand technical analysis, right? We need to understand the motives of traders and why they're buying and selling and looking for imbalances in supply and demand. It's not simply, you know, looking at just support and resistance levels and then that's it, right? We have to take into account value and motives, right? So, and where those orders are most likely to come into. So those are your options if you're looking to buy or sell. You know, the dollar, what you would do is wait for price to come up into here before looking for a sell trade on, you know, the next currency pairs that I'm going to be analyzing, which is the dollar yen, right? So at the moment we are up into this supply zone, right? So if you're looking for a sell trade, you're looking at here, you've got support, resistance, right? And then we could see some you know, movement to the downside. Who is going to be taking profit around here? Who is going to be entering new trades around here, right? If we're looking to be a buyer, right, then we have a new demand zone right here, as we've created a higher high, higher low demand zone, right? And if prices do come back down here, then, and you want to take advantage of any, you know, in this demand zone, if you think that the dollar is going to strengthen against the yen, this is where you'd be looking for, you know, your buy trades, and then you would apply the supply and demand order equations. Look for horizontal support and resistance. So in this area here, I think the most obvious is going to be probably around this level here, where you have a bit of resistance, and it is quite choppy around here, but you have a bit of resistance there, sorry, support, resistance, bit of support. It's not exactly the clearest level, but if you zoom back, maybe you start to see where prices did, you know, have reacted in the past, right? There. So we could see if prices do come back down into this 1-1 level, right, between this zone here, we could see some potential buying activity. And again, just go through dynamics, diagonal support and resistance, right? If there was any, probably from around there to there, right? So we've got some confluence there, and then look for 100 Nope. You might get maybe the 50 might be coming up into this area here, so you'd be looking for buy trades around here. From a sell trade perspective, we don't really have any dynamic or diagonal support and resistance, but we do have the horizontal. So those are your options. Moving on to the dollar Swiss, and we have last week we did create a demand zone here. There was some demand, but not the strongest area of demand, and you can see prices have, you know, come back down. If we actually broke above this level here, this is what I was saying last week, what you want to see is higher highs, higher lows being made before looking at taking advantage of this, you know, this type of demand zone. But what we are in is back down into a potential range. This is, like I said, a demand zone, but it's not an area that I would call one of the strongest areas of demand at the moment. From a technical perspective, I'd be looking for prices to probably come down anywhere down into here, but we are producing a potential range. So even though this is a demand zone, you'd be all right to potentially enter, because we are probably at the top right here. If we're looking at any kind of confluence, don't think we've got any confluence from a diagonal. Nope, nothing from a diagonal support and resistance perspective. And from a moving average perspective, nah, everything's above the price action at the moment, so there's no really support if you're looking to be a buyer. If you're looking to be a seller, then what you'd be looking for is let's look at the horizontal first. So have we got some horizontal? We've got some started to be created around here. So if we do get prices come up into here, we've got resistance here, prices come up into this zone, then we could see reversal right here, depending on which moving average, etc., comes in here if you do get any confluence. And then if you're looking for diagonal support and resistance, we've got some right there as well. So probably zoom in a bit, it's not necessarily any confluence within here, but at the moment this is where it is. If you did want to get short around here, that would also be an option, and then you'd have to probably go down into a lower time frame to look for any kind of support and resistance if there was any around here. But from a daily perspective, this would be where probably anywhere around here would be where you'd be looking to try and get short. Moving on to the dollar CAD, and the dollar CAD last week we did sell off into here. I did say this was a nice reversal candle if we wanted to get short, and there was some, you can see some resistance within this 1.32 level, you know, resistance, kind of broke through. Then we had some more resistance around here, prices did sell off, and then there wasn't any diagonal, and I don't think there was any dynamic either. Now everything was pretty much above, but again, we don't need everything. We determine value from fundamentals and sentiment. So if you were taking advantage of potential dollar profit taking, as we had 1, 2, 3, 4 days of dollar strength, and you know, this was pretty much the area to try and take advantage of. And as you can see, prices sold off. If you're looking to be a buyer of this currency pair, then you'd be looking for, let's see, where the obvious support and resistance is. I'd probably say one level's around there. There's probably another level towards this area here. Just that we need prices to come down if you're looking to be a buyer with the dollar into more into this demand zone, right, or this area right here, right? So this is where I'd be looking to be a buyer if prices do touch into this demand zone. And then if that doesn't, you know, if they don't get the right kind of price action, then we'd be looking for this area right here to be a buyer. And again, just look for confluences with support and diagonal support and resistance. Is there any? Yeah, this is where you'd be looking for this area here. So this 1.29, 6 level is where potentially, if prices do come down here, you may want to look to be a bit of a buy this week, if not down into this area here. And then you have also the 200 EMAs and SMAs below here, and I think the 21 and the 50s are above it, right? From a sell perspective, pretty much looking for prices to come all the way back up to this area right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this demand zone right to here. So you'd need price to come up here before looking at a sell trade. And there's your potential confluence within that area from a diagonal resistance perspective, right? And you'd be looking for prices again, just price action to come down into here, and then try and look for a sell trade. Looking at the New Zealand dollar, US dollar, and I did say last week that if we do get prices break lower, we've created lower highs and lower lows, which we did. This became our supply zone, and then we can see price action is starting to sell off, right? So let's look at where potentially there was some support and resistance within that supply and demand zone, and you can see it around here. Prices maybe, let's see if there was anything on the lower time frame, maybe around, if you would have picked it off, maybe here, but nah, that would have been a bit forcing it, to be fair. Prices didn't really come up into the round number, which is what I was hoping for. This 0.66 level came just before that and started to sell off. So if you do want to be, if you take advantage of this though, based off of, I think it was news on Friday, then well done to you. If you're looking at buying, then again, probably anywhere down into this demand zone is where you'd be looking for. And let's probably zoom out a bit more. If we're looking at long-term horizontal support and resistance, I think that's probably the area. Let's zoom in a bit more. Probably anywhere around here, I would say. So prices, if the prices do come down into here, then be a buyer potentially, or we could create a double bottom, right? And then if you see price action within, because we are still within this demand zone, long-term demand zone anyway, you might want to be a buyer around here. Moving on to the pound dollar. Now, last week we came up into this supply zone, and I was saying that it wasn't necessarily a textbook supply zone. Supply zone, because it didn't really make lower highs, lower lows, and it had touched here as well. I had a feeling that it was going to push higher, which it did. You can delete that, right? And we're up into a zone where I'm definitely trying to be a seller, again depending on sentiment as well. But if we're looking from a technical perspective, what we're looking for is some horizontal support and resistance. So I think the most obvious area, let's go back a bit, is going to be I would have said probably there, even though it's quite under the level. Let's have a look. I would put it anywhere around here where you've got some support, resistance, support, and it's just come up into this 131 area where you can see, support, that candlestick there, bit of resistance, support, and then we've come up into this zone, right? And then we've, you know, rejected. So now wouldn't be a bad time to try and get short. If you've missed out on a lower time frame entry, then maybe you want to wait for prices to potentially come back up before looking at, you know, selling if you haven't got short and you wanted to get short. If you're trading on a daily time frame chart, you know, there's a nice little pin bar right there, and we had some confluence, I think, with the actually no, we didn't on this one, I don't think. Yeah, we just come just above it, right around here, but we did have, I think, some dynamic support and resistance. What was it on? No, it wasn't on this one then. It wasn't what I was thinking. But we do have it above. So if prices do, you know, take out some stops around the highs, you do have the 100 and 200 to try and get short again. And there is a level where you've got some support and resistance. I would probably say it's in between here. So you've got support, bit of resistance and support around here, and you've got resistance here. So maybe the higher end, you know, this 132 level might be, you know, the level if this, you know, if you get stopped out on this level here, if you want to get short on the on this currency pair. If you're looking to get long, then this is going to be where you're looking to get your first long, your first demand zone right here. And then what you would do is look for any buy trades around here. I think from a technical perspective, I do like this buy. And then look for diagonal support and resistance within that area. And then I think all the moving averages are facing down, so you wouldn't get any dynamic support and resistance. Pound yen, and if we're looking to be buyers of the pound yen, then what we're looking for is demand zones. We've created a couple right here. Let me just get rid of this for now. And then what we want to do again is look for this area, look for where we've got horizontal support and resistance, potentially as confluence within that area. Let's go back a little bit. Let's see. And there was a bit around here as well. It has been used as potential, you know, support, bit of resistance, support area around here, bit of support, rejected, and now we've, you know, we're into, you know, rejected, then came up into this zone. So you're looking for prices to come back into this area. Then horizontal, do we have any horizontal? Diagonal, sorry, diagonal. If we do get some diagonal, that would be great as well around this area. And then we want to look for dynamic, which is going to be, I think, above price action from a 100 and 200, but we see the 21 and the 50 turning up into this area as well. So from a supply and demand order equation, we could see some demand coming in, some buying. If we're looking at sell trades, then where we are currently, I would say this is where you've got some support and resistance, support, bit of support resistance there. Then we've got some recent here, and we've reacted off of that level there. Now diagonal, anything from the top, maybe might be looking at this one, give us a better angle. So yeah, or even here where you've got that, actually that'd be a bit high. So you could be looking at this area as some confluence as well, and then obviously the 100 and the 200, see where they are. You've got the one of the 200 SMAs or EMAs above, touching here right? So you've got potential for supply and demand equation, you know, supply coming in, more supply coming in this area from a technical perspective. Again, who's buying, taking profit around here, who's entering new positions, not new short positions. This is where you want to try and get short. Looking at the pound Swiss came up into that supply zone, but let's look at this from a demand perspective. So we did actually get to see, and we did react off of this long-term demand zone right here, broke through some previous supply, so this becomes demand. And now let's go through the process. So horizontal support and resistance, do we have any within this area? Looks like it. You can see where we have resistance, a bit of support here, bit of resistance, and then we've reacted around here, right? Any kind of diagonal? I don't think we do. Let's have a look. Nope. And now let's look at dynamic from a buying perspective. Everything I think is going to be above price, as we've been in this this downtrend over the past so since April. So we haven't got necessarily confluence of that. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be a buyer of the pound against the Swiss. Obviously we do that through fundamentals and determine from a fundamental perspective where we want to, which currency we want to be a buyer of, and which one we want to be a seller of. But we just use these technical supply and demand order equations just to see if we have any confluence within those areas. Now from a selling perspective, if we're looking at horizontal support and resistance, you can see where we've developed something around here. If we go back further, potentially on the upside, yeah, so you can see around here where you've got it, support, bit of support there, and then we've got some resistance here confirmed. So if you do want to be a seller and you're not a seller already, that's where you're looking to potentially get short any diagonal resistance. Nope. Let's look at something from maybe here to here. Nope. And from here to here, there's potentially some right there, right? So you can see it's been reacting off of it, but I think if it comes up, then that level would have probably gone anyway. So dynamic again is right above the supply zone right here, so it may not get up to the 50. We're obviously above the 21 if you're looking to be a seller, but if we do come down and then move up, and then the 50 starts to come down into this supply zone, then you're probably going to have some confluence as a seller, as trying to get short. Euro dollar, and last week we did have an area that had been used several times, support and resistance. You can see around here, right, where you have support, resistance. So supply zone wise, this would have looked decent to the downside on the lower time frame. You can see where prices started to sell off around this 1.17 round number on the lower time frames. Again, from a selling perspective, if you're looking at diagonal support and resistance, this would have been what you would have been looking at, as we've had pretty much bounced off of there, and then price came back up into this zone right here, and then from a 100 and 200 EMA SMA, you've got the 100 SMAs and EMAs coming down here as confluence, looking at resistance here. So again, just going over why traders are potentially selling and why traders are potentially buying from a supply and demand order equation perspective. Why are traders buying into potential supply? You wouldn't necessarily, you wouldn't be, but again, this is just basically probabilities, and we're just looking at the reasons why we want to get long and short from a technical perspective and the motives behind that. If you're looking to be a buyer of the euro, then we have to come down into this demand zone. We can see this demand zone here. It's got that support and resistance, pretty obvious. So we'd be looking for prices to come down into this level here before looking to get long. And let's see if we have diagonal support and resistance right here. Let's see if we can draw that again. And you'll be looking at something like that. Remember, this doesn't always have to line up with, as far as diagonal and horizontal. If you do have horizontal, support here and prices do come down into here, then you can still be a buyer. If you see your price action, that you use to enter a trade. If not, then this would be the next level down here within this demand zone, and then obviously I think the MAs are pretty much above or around this area here as well. So if you did get any MAs within this demand zone, then you'd be looking to be, as some extra confluence. Looking at the euro yen, and the euro yen, it did break above that supply zone last week, and now we're into supply. So from a supply perspective and selling perspective right now, you may want to look to get short. Again, why are you looking to get short? Potentially from a horizontal support and resistance level. You can see pretty much around here there's been a level of interest, resistance, bit choppy around here, but you've had resistance, and recent resistance within this 131 level just before it as well. Diagonal, you've had this area right here, which came up into this supply zone, and then from a 100 and 200 perspective, you had this, I think it was the simple moving average, came up into this area as well. So there was quite a lot of potential supply coming in, and you can see prices have reacted, profit taking going on, and potentially new sell orders coming into that area. If you want to be a buyer this week, then what you're looking at is horizontal support and resistance within that level. You can see there is some confluence, slightly higher. Right, so you got support, and you've got resistance here, support, resistance, bit choppy around here. Then you've got price come up. So what you could see is prices come down in to this area here before looking to get long. Do we have any diagonal? Yes, we do. And then I think the moving averages are pretty much above, or they're around that area. Yeah, so we've got 50 and the 21 in and around this area. So depending on obviously when prices come down here, we could see some some demand coming into the market. right? We also have another demand zone down here, as well as some here, right? So again, do the same thing around here for these demand zones. See where you want to be a buyer or a seller. Euro pound, and broken through that demand zone, and we're down into this area here. So horizontal support and resistance, you can see there's an area right here. It's pretty obvious, not so obvious within this choppy range, but it has reacted. You can see resistance, resistance, support, support, resistance. So it is a level that has been used. It's quite a wide zone between this 0.89 level and maybe 8.6, but it's within this demand zone anyway. So this is where you might want to be looking to potentially get longs. Do we have any diagonal? I think we do. From here to here, right? Got some dynamic support, and then let's see where the moving averages are. Yeah, we've got long-term moving averages, the 100 and the 200s below here as well. So again, we've got potential demand coming in from a supply perspective. Your nearest supply zone at the moment is going to be up here, because unless we create lower lows, and then we'd be looking for this area to be an area of supply. But as it hasn't happened yet, this is going to be your area of supply right here, and then you'd be looking to do the same thing. So bit of support and resistance there. Prices didn't react to it, and then resisted here again, and then don't know whether this would be, you wouldn't really have any diagonal support and resistance. Nah, nothing there. And then from a dynamic, everything is pretty much below. I say everything, but the major ones, with the 100 and 200, the longer term ones are below, and the 21 is going to be above, but I don't think it would be up here if prices do come up anyway. So you haven't got as much confluence, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be getting short depending on your fundamental sentiment analysis. Euro Swiss, and prices did come up last week into this supply zone here as we created lower highs, lower lows, and you can see prices started to sell off. They hit the 21 moving averages as well. So let's look at this from a potential, from a horizontal support and resistance level. It was probably around here. There wasn't anything really matching up with it, I can see. Nothing immediate anyway. But you could have obviously got short depending on, you know, if you saw it on an hourly time frame chart. This would have been maybe resistance, bit of a fake out there. Looks like a stop hunt to me, and then prices are looking to go to the downside. But from a sell-in, let's have a look. Is there anything there? Nope. Let's see if there's anything. There wouldn't have been anything on that one, but there might be something. Looking at that now as it becomes resistance, but I wouldn't put that there. Depending on what happens to price, I have to wait for price to develop. This was some demand here, but I didn't put the demand zone simply because we didn't really make any higher highs technically. Even though there is demand here, we could see prices come down into this zone and then react again, just putting in some sort of double bottom. If I'm looking to be a buyer from a technical perspective, really here is the nearest demand zone. Unless we create higher highs, then we wait for a pullback into that demand zone before looking to get long. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't necessarily be entering down at the bottom, but just really from a technical perspective, this isn't necessarily the strongest area of demand if you're looking at it from just purely technicals. So demand wise, yeah, you'd have to really look for prices to come all the way down into here before looking at a long position. Euro Aussie, and we did come down into this demand zone here. I said from last week, I was looking at a lower time frame chart, I think, and I just said that this would be the area from a support and resistance perspective, and you can see where prices did, you know, react off of that and then go higher. But from a demand perspective, daily perspective, let's have a look. So if we drag that across, that would have been where the area where you would be looking for, you know, some potential demand here. Don't think there was any diagonal support and resistance. Nah, there wasn't any. And then from a dynamic support and resistance, I don't think there was a 100 or 200. But there, you might want to wait for prices. If you're looking to get long, you'd have to wait for prices to come back either into this demand zone. Sorry, this demand zone here, but horizontal support and resistance, or wait for price to come down into this area here. Again, look for any other horizontal support and resistance within that level before looking to get long, which I can't really see. There is a little bit, but it's not, it's all right, I guess. Where you have resistance, 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 but it's not exactly clear. But lower ends of demand zones are okay anyway, even without the horizontal support and resistance. But obviously we want to, you know, make sure that we have this equation, you know, on our side as well. Yeah, so no dynamic either at the moment. If we're looking from a selling perspective, I think if we zoom out, we're starting to sell off a little bit from here, and then what we'd want to do is probably wait for lower highs and lower lows to be made, and then this would become an area of supply, and then we would look for prices to come up into this area, then look to sell off. So moving on to the Australian dollar, US dollar, and last week we reacted from this demand zone from, I think it was like 2016, all the way back here, February 2016. And if you want to be a buyer of the Australian dollar, then what you'd be looking for is prices potentially to come back down into somewhere into this demand zone before looking to get long. From a horizontal perspective, horizontal support and resistance, there is a little bit, but it's right there, but it is quite choppy. You can see it when I zoom in a little bit. There is an area around this 7-1 where you're starting to see, zoom in, support, bit of resistance here again, bit of support there. And then if you come all the way back to the present day, you've got a bit of support here. So again, this 71 level or nearabouts could be a decent buy. Don't think you've got any dynamic or no, you haven't got any dynamic or diagonal support and resistance within the buy zones. But if you're looking to get short, then you will be looking at this area here to try and look for a short, which is what we came up into on Thursday and Friday. So we can see where prices did start to sell off, and they are selling off now. If you're looking to obviously get short, you'd have to wait for a pullback to try and get short there. And then we did react off of the 21 dynamic, and then support, or so I say resistance, and then we've got the let's see if there was any. There wasn't any diagonal, but it's creating a diagonal resistance at the moment, so I wouldn't put that on there. So that is the Aussie dollar, again, if you want to be a buyer, wait for price to come down into anywhere this area here. If you're looking to be a seller, that'd be the first area to look to try and get short. And lastly, the Australian dollar, Japanese yen. Again, last week we did come up into this area here where you're looking at, didn't quite touch this diagonal support and resistance. There was a bit of horizontal, zoom out a little bit, support, bit of support, prices kind of broke through but then supported again, bit of resistance, and then prices come up into the top end of this area here. And then you had the 21 also around here from a selling perspective. So right now, if you trade off the daily, then, and that's a type of price action you want to see, then look to get potentially short. If you're looking to get long, then anywhere around this pretty 79 round number would be where you're looking to potentially get long. It looks like we have created a bit of support and resistance again within this zone here. Let's move that down a little bit. Yeah, you got support, bit of resistance, bit of support, resistance, and then we come forward, and then we've obviously come down again right into here. So if you want to get long, then this is where you'd be looking to potentially get long. And again, just I don't think we have any type of dynamic or diagonal support and resistance. It's confluence here, but I think the horizontal should be enough if you think that fundamentally the Australian dollar is going to get stronger against the Japanese yen, or if the yen is going to get stronger due to probably some sort of risk sentiment, then this isn't the place to buy. So I know pretty much a long video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, just email me at info@trading180.com or leave a comment in the section box below. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and share to your fellow trading colleagues, and take care. I hope you have a great trading week. So if you'd like to receive the best supply and demand Forex levels absolutely free, click on the link in the description box below, enter your email address, and we'll send you the levels that we have just analyzed in this video. You'll get all of the major Forex currency pairs, and you'll get regular updates and never miss a Forex trading opportunity.